This is a very quiet, serious group. I hope we're having fun. Welcome. My name is Barbara McGregor. I'm the Education Director here at the Gerald Ford Presidential Museum, and it is truly my pleasure to welcome all of you this evening. Best wishes. Before leaving town, she sent me an email that said, after reading the top essays, all three are amazing and each different from the other. I'm sorry I can't be there on Monday to meet all of the finalists. And that's truly from her heart. She wishes she was here. This is really a very special evening for all of us. I know it is for our finalists and for your friends and family, but it is for the museum and the press too. We're so proud of all of you, and we all get very excited about this event. Many years ago, President Ford said, this, referring to the museum, is not a monument to any man or any one presidency. Rather, it is a classroom of American democracy, a place where school kids, as well as scholars, will enjoy access to the innermost workings of their government. Over the course of nearly 3 decades, we have taken these words to heart, offering a wide range of exhibits, events, lectures, school programs, to visitors of all ages, with the goal of bringing those words, those hopes, and that vision expressed so eloquently by President Ford to life. The President Gerald R. Ford Essay Challenge is a very important part of that programming. With the Essay Challenge, we focus each year on a theme that reflects one of the character traits that made President Ford the man, the congressman, and the president he was. Integrity, leadership, patriotism. This year's theme, courage, is no exception. Marty Allen, who's able to join us tonight sitting in the back, I'm going to draw attention to him here, the chairman emeritus of our foundation, the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation, shared his thoughts with me about President Ford and courage, and I would like to share some of them with you this evening. Marty reflected that President Ford practiced the courage of his convictions, placing the national interest above all else, including politics. He did so when, just 10 days into his presidency, this World War II combat veteran addressed the veterans of foreign wars and announced an amnesty program for over 50,000 Vietnam draft evaders, giving these young Americans a second chance. He did so 3 weeks later when he issued a full, free, and absolute pardon to Richard Nixon because he fully believed it was in the nation's best interest. He did so when, defying the advice of staff to exercise executive privilege, he testified before Congress regarding the pardon, becoming the first president to do so since Abraham Lincoln. He did so when, as Saigon fell in April 1975, he determined that the United States must rescue over 130,000 Vietnamese as their country was falling to the North Vietnamese forces. And he did so when, at the Helsinki Accords meetings, he confronted Leonid Brezhnev on the communists' lack of human rights. I would like to add here to Marty's thoughts that Gerald Ford wasn't the only one in the family to display extraordinary courage. Betty Ford has also displayed her own brand of courage throughout her life. From leaving her hometown of Grand Rapids to follow her passion and study dance in New York City as a young woman, to always speaking her mind and being true to herself, to the hundreds of thousands of lives she has saved by her willingness to speak openly about her struggles with breast cancer and substance abuse at a time when those were not issues easily dealt with in the public arena. To quote President Ford, as Marty did, "Courage can be self-defeating, but the greatest defeat would be to live without courage, for that would be hardly living at all." Now, before we go on, I want to just briefly run through the Essay Challenge events. As you know, we kicked it off on Constitution Day, September 17th. The essays were due this fall, at which point we started a 3-tiered review process of the essays. So you 18 can be really proud of yourselves. We received over 350 essays this year from schools throughout West Michigan. The first round, we used retired teachers and school administrators some press staff, some museum staff to go through the essays first. They select their top 5 from the bundle that they get. Then the second phase is others from the press and the museum look at all those top essays and have to narrow it down to 18. Once we have the 18, we pass those on to what I call our community judges. And they select the top 3, first, second, and third place, and they're allowed to select up to 3 honorable mention recipients each year. The judges receive these with no identification on them. They just have a tracking number, so we know once we get their responses who to give credit to. They don't know if you're male or female, what school you go to, what city you live in, or if you live in the country. They know nothing. They just base their selections purely on the merit of the essays. The judges this year I would like to recognize. First, we have Paul Keep, the editor of the Grand Rapids Press, Hank Meyer, who most of you know of as the co-chair and CEO of Meyer Incorporated. What many of you don't know is that Hank is also an historian and author, so he brings some knowledge about writing to his judging as well. The third judge is Ms. Kim Coleman, the executive director of the Grand Rapids Bar Association. So you can see, the 18 of you, that you had your essays read and discussed by some pretty knowledgeable, qualified people. So I think you need to be especially proud of yourselves. So to our 18 finalists, I want to say congratulations. We received over 350 essays, like I said, this year. And through the 3 rounds of judging, your essays were considered the best. To your teachers, I want to say thank you for a job well done. The work you do every day is so important to your students and to our future as a nation. And to your parents, thank you for the support you provide your children on a daily basis. Without that support, it would be far more difficult for them to succeed in school and in life. And finally, a program like this wouldn't be possible without generous partners. I want to thank the Grand Rapids Press and News and Education for seeing the value in this essay challenge and partnering with us year after year. And I especially would like to thank the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation for their generous financial support of the Gerald R. Ford Essay Challenge. Without that support, this competition would not be possible. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you the Executive Director of the Gerald R. Ford Foundation, Mr. Joe Calvaruso. Joe?
Thank you, Barbara. One of the first events I did last year when I joined the foundation was coming here to this group, and it was a heartfelt way to start out my tenure here at the foundation. On behalf of the Ford family and the foundation, welcome to everybody. Those of you that took the time and energy and dedication should be commended for your effort, and just by being here tonight, you are certainly a winner. One of the things that comes to mind when you think of President Ford is certainly courage, in other words, integrity, and the third word that I always think of is public service. And hopefully the essays you wrote for tonight will spark maybe in some of you the fact that public service is one of the most important things you can do in your life. And I know those events that I have done through the years that have to do with public service are very, very rewarding. Gerald R. Ford first started his public service career as a Navy officer during World War II. He went on to serve 13 consecutive terms in Congress, and about the time he was considering retiring, he was asked to serve as Vice President of the United States, a duty that he accepted as a responsibility and as a public service to his country. He later went on to, as we all know, to become President and served in a time of crisis in our country. You know, the foundation is pleased to sponsor this event in the name of President Gerald R. Ford. And any of those that are interested in joining as a member of the foundation, I'll be here afterwards. I look forward to meeting each and every one of you. Parents, teachers, and friends, you should be very proud of the individuals that participate in this contest tonight. I've also read the winners, and hats off. Those judges had a tough time to look at the quality of these and which ones to pick. It's my honor to introduce Paul Keep, editor of the Grand Rapids Press. We'd like to thank him and his people and the organization for the sponsorship of being involved in this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody. It's a great honor for me to be here. This is my first involvement in the essay challenge, and as a judge I was able to see what the 18 finalists wrote, and very, very impressive. So thank you and congratulations on behalf of all of the employees at the Grand Rapids Press. We appreciate good writing, and we're glad that some young writers are coming up. I cannot think of a more appropriate location for us tonight on President's Day to be in this building to honor students that have done so much good work, and also to honor a former student in Grand Rapids who, of course, went on to become President of the United States, which any of you might do, and I hope that you will. And when you think about courage, that's something that Gerald R. Ford obviously demonstrated throughout his whole life. You heard a lot of the examples already. Let me add a few more. You have someone who, at age 2 weeks after he was born, his mom and dad separated, and the mom moved Gerald Ford here to Grand Rapids, which changed Grand Rapids history as well as ours. You've got someone who served in the military, which I think takes a great deal of courage no matter what role you play. You had someone who ran for Congress as a Republican, taking on a sitting Republican who already represented this area in Congress, and he defeated that person. It took a lot of courage to challenge the establishment. He also challenged the establishment in 1965 when he challenged the sitting House Minority Leader, Representative Halleck, and beat him, became the top-ranked Republican in Congress. We've talked about the pardon of Richard Nixon. That was probably the most unpopular thing he did. Many think maybe that cost him a chance to win re-election in 1976. But as was stated, he did that because he thought it was right for the country, and that was more important to him than what may have been politically right for Gerald R. Ford. Interestingly, after he was defeated, and obviously that's not an easy thing to go through, he became a good friend of Jimmy Carter, the person who defeated him for the presidency. And I would submit to you it takes a great deal of courage to do that and to go on with your life and still make it very productive, which he did. So again, it was a pleasure to be one of the 3 judges. I think I speak for the other 2 when I say it was easy work, in the sense that it was a pleasure to read the essays that we received, and you're all to be commended for that. If I do the math right, Barbara, there's 18 finalists here. 3 are the top winners, so I've got 15 people I've got to get through to get to the car safely, right? They might be after me, but remember, it was very close, and everyone did an outstanding job. So with that, do I turn it over to Miranda? Thank you.
I'm Miranda, and I have the pleasure of being the Newspapers and Education Coordinator for the Grand Rapids Press, Kalamazoo Gazette, and Muskegon Chronicle. And for the past several years, we've had the privilege of partnering with the Gerald R. Ford Museum on this awesome essay challenge. I love it because it gives students the opportunity to earn money for college, which students need, but more importantly, it gives students the opportunity to have a voice. And as we were talking about this year's competition and this year's title, What Does Courage Mean Today?, I started thinking about all the people in my journey that I have the opportunity of meeting, and we were thinking who would be a good keynote speaker. And I wanted it to be someone relevant, someone who truly knows courage firsthand, and I immediately thought of a young woman I met several years ago at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital. I am thrilled that throughout the past several years that I've known her, we've met each other at different occasions. And every time, she brings me to tears for a variety of reasons, because I look at her and I think, this is what true courage is, this is what the future is, and it makes me proud to call her my friend. It is my honor to introduce to you Marissa Freiling.
Like Miranda said, my name is Marissa Freiling, and I am honored to be speaking with you guys tonight. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about myself. I graduated from South Christian High School and spent 2 years at Grand Rapids Community College and I'm currently at Kuiper College, where I am majoring in Bible theology and communications. So tonight I'm going to share with you guys just a little bit about some of the things I've struggled with through life that have involved courage. I am sure you guys all remember your first day as a freshman in high school. I remember being so excited, but yet utterly terrified. I would walk down the halls clinging to my books and constantly looking at the map of the school just to make sure I didn't get lost, all the while being towered over by upperclassmen. I remember just mustering up the courage to go and chat with some of my new classmates. It was just 2 months into my freshman year of high school. I had made some great friends, was playing on a premier soccer team, and spending Friday nights at football games. That's when something happened that would have to take even more courage than what it took my first day of high school. Some unusual things began to happen. I started slowing up on the soccer field. I felt like I was getting a cold, my lymph nodes were swollen, and I had these 2 bug bites on my legs that just weren't healing. So I went to the doctor to get it checked out. He told us it was probably just mono, had me get some blood work, and then pretty much just sent me on my way. Later that night, after I had gone to bed, my parents received a phone call urging them to take me down to the emergency room. My white blood count was in the 70,000 range, when normal is between 4,000 and 10,000. We got down to the hospital and were sitting there waiting for the results of yet another blood draw. And the doctor finally came into our room, and the news wasn't good. I had cancer. I was diagnosed on October 16, 2002, with acute myelogenous leukemia, also known as AML. AML is the more aggressive type of leukemia mostly found in adults and not so common in children. And the treatment consisted of hard chemo rounds and long hospital stays. I don't remember the exact words I said after hearing the news, but I do remember I had 2 questions. Would I lose my hair, and would I die? The next day, I started chemo. Over the next 4 months, I ended up going through 4 long, hard chemo treatments and was only able to attend school 6 more days that year. During this time, my Aunt Lisa had graciously started writing emails, many times daily, in order to keep friends and family up to date on how I was doing. She also started writing a website as well, where we could post updates on my progress, and therefore limiting the phone calls and the amount of times we would have to repeat what was going on. I'm actually going to read a portion of one of the updates I wrote in the midst of these chemo rounds when I felt I was just beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Hey everyone, just wanted to say thanks again for all the prayers. They have brought me this far, and I am sure they will help me with this last stretch. I think of this whole experience as sort of a relay race. With me being in track, it is kind of similar. The first stretch is always the hardest. You have to try and bring your team up into the lead and try and get a good head start. The second and third parts are kind of like boosters. They get you pumped up to run the last stretch. The last stretch is always the most exciting part for both the race and for me. You want to win and get done with it as fast as you can. With being in the last stretch of this whole treatment, I know that I am going to win. I can see the finish in sight and know that I am almost there. I have 2 more treatments to go, counting the one that I started this Friday. This one is a 6-day drip of chemo, so I kind of figured it was kind of like a 70-meter sprint. Pray that it is fast and easy for me. And I ended the email or the update with some lyrics by a song by Clay Cross, and it says, "I will follow Christ. I will fight. I will run the race, fighting the good fight and standing on my faith. I will wear the name of Jesus. I will give him all my life. As for me, no matter what the sacrifice, I will follow Christ." Unfortunately, when I was going to begin my 5th and final round of treatment, I relapsed, meaning the cancer had come back. Now, my only hope for a cure was a bone marrow transplant. My bone marrow donor was found from the National Bone Marrow Registry, and the transplant took place May 16 of 2003. After being in the hospital for 103 days straight, I was finally discharged. The transplant road was not an easy road for me to take, and I dealt with many side effects, one being graft versus host disease. This means that my new bone marrow was seeing many parts of my body as foreign and attacking it. Steroids were the best way to combat the graft versus host disease, but steroids have their side effects too, and my bones got the brunt of that one, especially my hips. That was when my soccer career ended, with the thinning of my bones and collapsing of my hip joints. It just wasn't possible. I began to walk on crutches for 2.5 years. I also got a horrible virus in my bladder, and the medicine that helped clear the virus up was really hard on my kidneys. And so in the year 2004, my kidneys were failing, and I was put on dialysis in November of that year. Dialysis was both emotionally and physically hard on me. I would go to Helen DeVos Children's Hospital 3 times a week for about 4 hours at a time. It would pretty much wipe me out, and by the time I would get home, I would end up taking a nap. I felt like I was in a vicious circle. It seemed as if I was going 3 steps back and only 2 steps forward. I learned attitude is a choice, but it takes courage to choose joy. While growing up, I loved horses. I started riding when I was 4 years old, and I can think back to the first time I fell off, and my instructor told me to get right back on. And I remember looking at her with my hands on my hips thinking, are you serious? This horse just bucked me off. I am not getting back on. And she explained to me that once someone falls off and doesn't get back on right away, the harder it is for them to get back on later. And I think good old John Wayne says it pretty well. Courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. Knowing that I needed a kidney transplant was a little intimidating. There were questions going through my head, such as, what would it feel like, and would it hurt? But the biggest question I had was, who is going to give me their kidney? My answer came because I was able to unite with my unrelated bone marrow donor. That was when we began to build our very unique and special relationship. Her name is Celeste Ryan. She lives in California with her husband and 2 kids. And after finding out that I was in need of a kidney transplant, she did some research and found she was going to be the best match for me, since we now share the same DNA. So after being on dialysis for 9 months, Celeste flew to Michigan with her family, and she selflessly gave me her kidney on August 30 of 2005. The transplant couldn't have gone smoother, and in 5 days I was home, one of my shortest hospital stays, and she was back on a plane to California. As for my hips, while in 2006 I was able to get both of my hips partially replaced. This had given me a couple years off crutches and with minimal pain. But over this last year, I had to get my left hip totally replaced, and actually just over Christmas break, I had my right hip fully replaced. I have been a cancer survivor for 7 years now and am considered cured, and as for my kidney, it's working like a charm. So when I look back over my 7-year journey, I asked, what is courage to me? And this is what I came up with. Courage is when you have an experience in life, when you have to stop and look fear in the face and not run away from it. It is when someone can choose the attitude of joy in the midst of difficult times. Being courageous is when you look not at how many times you fall, but how many times you get back up. I could not have gone through this journey by myself. I first and foremost give this all to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ, who has given me the strength and perseverance to overcome all these challenges and the courage to face them. I am so thankful for my family and my friends and the medical team at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital. I want to thank you guys for this opportunity to speak tonight. May each of you have the strength and courage to face whatever adversities life sets before you and emerge stronger and more confident because of it. I look forward to hearing some of you guys' essays, and thanks again for letting me be a part of the night.
Did I tell you she was amazing? And the offer still stands. When you graduate, you get my job. She's awesome. At this time, we're going to recognize our 18 winners. This is how it will work. We will alphabetically call your name. As we call your name, you will come up and you'll walk around this direction if you'd like, or straight across the stage. We'll call your name. You'll come up. We'll stand all up here until we announce all 18. Then we will announce our honorable mentions. At that time, if we call your name, you'll step forward. We'll give you a round of applause. Then you will all return to your seats, and we will call our top 3 back up. And then you will read your essay if you are part of that top 3. Sound good? Great. I'd like to introduce Andrew Alt from Kennewa Hills High School. Next, Stephanie Banta from Forest Hills Eastern. There we go. Will Barkley from Grand Rapids Catholic Central. As Will is coming up, Eric Bates is next, but Eric is unable to join us. He was doing college visits and was supposed to be home today, but he is stranded in California. So he wishes he were with us. Let's give him a round of applause and hope he gets home safely. Sarah Denbraver from Grand Rapids Catholic Central. Adam Finney from Allendale High School. Lindsay Gutting from Grand Rapids Catholic Central. Courtney Cox from Hart High School. James Eugene Loss from Holland Christian High School. David Jesse Ludema from Grand Rapids Christian High School. Rachel McDaniel from Allegan High School. David Mowell from Hart High School. Lisa DeWilly from Forest Hills Eastern High School. Caroline Poole from Grand Rapids Catholic Central. Matthew Rudy from Sparta High School. Martha Veldkamp from Calvin Christian High School. Megan Wilson from Allendale High School. And Kelly Witkowski from Kenowa Hills High School. Let's give our 18 finalists a big round of applause. Congratulations. And now I am opening the sealed envelope for the honorable mentions. As I call your name, please step forward. Will Barkley, Grand Rapids Catholic Central. James Eugene Loss from Holland Christian. Isn't it fun to have so much stuff? Kelly Witkowski from Kenowa Hills High School. And let's give them one more round of applause. Congratulations. At this time, you may all make your way back to your seats. And we will open the sealed envelope for our top three. If I call your name once again, please do bring your essays, and we'll be prepared to read those. If you do not have your essays, we have a copy for you. In third place, Rachel McDaniel from Allegan High School.
Okay. My essay is called Courage Today. The courage of our founding fathers and their fellow patriots to bravely declare themselves free from British colonial rule in 1776 began a long tradition of courage as an American quality. Without the courage of our forefathers, America would not be the powerful country that it is today. It would not be able to function as a representative democracy, and we would not be able to enjoy the numerous freedoms we do as citizens. There would be no way to keep the government relevant as changes occur over time, and there would be no hope for a more equal and peaceful tomorrow. In this time of economic, domestic, and international struggle, without the courage many contemporary Americans possess, the future for our nation would be bleak. After 20 years of being a dedicated employee at a local factory, a man gets laid off when 300 jobs are outsourced to Mexico. With a family to support, he wakes up each morning to search for another job. Facing rejection day after day, this man never gives up. That is courage today. After a broken arm and 7 stitches, a woman decides enough is enough. Without looking back, she walks away from her abusive boyfriend. Through a local women's shelter, she finds the help she needs to get a job, to support herself, and the strength she needs to get her life back. That is courage today. After leaving their house, a gay couple holds hands while they walk along the street. Without flinching, they ignore the suspicious whispers and the disapproving glares they meet along their way. That is courage today. After high school, a young man enlists in the Army. With the desire to honor his family and his country, he is deployed to Afghanistan. Potentially sacrificing his future, this man fights bravely beside his fellow soldiers, defending the freedoms that America stands for. That is courage today. After growing up in turmoil and repression in their home country, a family immigrates to America. With their past behind them and their mind set on a brighter, freer future for themselves and an education for their children, they become naturalized. While maintaining their cultural identity, they create a new home in their new country. That is courage today. After growing up in America and learning of the legacies of its many leaders, both the praised and the criticized, an African-American man decides to take on the challenge. With the support of many and the disapproval of others, he campaigns for change. As the nation heads towards an economic depression, he is elected President of the United States of America. That is courage today. In the words of President John F. Kennedy, a man does what he must, in spite of personal consequences, in spite of obstacles and dangers and pressures, and that is the basis of all morality. Courage is about being willing to live each day with the willpower to stand for what is right, despite the potential costs. As Americans, we must strive to live our lives courageously, maintaining the integrity with which our great nation was founded. Thank you.
Rachel will be getting a $1,000 savings bond and college scholarship. Second place, and winning $1,500. Sarah Denbarber, Grand Rapids Catholic Central High School.
The courage of a lion. I never knew the true meaning of courage until the day I walked into that long, dreary room. Gray recliners lined both walls, and everywhere you turned there was an IV pole. Nurses were walking around taking temperatures, monitoring blood pressure levels, and talking to kids who sat in the chairs. There were kids of all different ages sitting in those chairs. I saw babies, toddlers, and teenagers like myself. Some of the kids were sleeping, while others were playing on computers or watching the TVs that hung from the ceiling. There were kids doing crafts, playing games, reading books, or just talking to each other and their parents. Most of them had little to no hair. All of them had tubes coming from some part of their body because they were all hooked up to an IV pole. Bags of liquid hung on the poles. Several of the bags were clear, a few were a yellowish tan color, and a couple others were a deep crimson red. This was the infusion room at the Helen DeVos Children's Hospital Hematology and Oncology Clinic. I had just been diagnosed with a blood disorder called idiopathic thrombocytopenia purpura not 10 minutes before I had walked into that room. I remember feeling like the world had stopped. I wanted to burst into tears, and I was afraid. I was afraid of what was going to happen to me and what they were going to do to me. My nurse turned to me and said, "This is the room where you will stay during your treatments. It's called the infusion room. We'll give you your treatment through an IV like these kids here." I glanced around at all of the other kids who were getting treated. I figured that most of them had cancer, and the others probably had a blood disorder or musculoskeletal problem. After all, it was the Hematology and Oncology Center. That's when I stopped walking. I looked around yet again, and questions started to flood my mind. Why were the kids smiling and laughing? Isn't cancer supposed to be some horrible, deadly sickness? How could these kids be so happy and cheerful while I was standing there feeling as if I had dipped in the frigid waters of the Arctic? What was going on? An adorable little girl, who could not have been more than 6 years old, looked up at me from her drawing, and our eyes met. The answer to all of my questions hit me right then. These kids all had an impossible amount of courage. It wasn't as if they had a choice of contracting cancer, and it was probably extremely hard and frightening for them. However, courage is not the absence of fear. In fact, courage to me is admitting that you are afraid, yet facing your fear no matter how badly you want to run away. These kids' courage is what was giving them the hope and strength they needed to persevere throughout their illness. They had to wake up every morning and worry about serious things like medicine and test results. They had to live their lives not knowing what could happen at the next fork in the road and not being able to participate in activities that healthy kids could. To go through life that way at such a young age takes a lot of courage, and that is exactly what these kids possessed that I didn't. As the girl and I stood there staring at each other, I learned how to have courage. People tend to think that great courage can only be found in important or famous people. They associate courage with heroes in movies or knights in fantasies. Excuses are made such as, "Oh, I can't be courageous, I'm not strong enough or great enough, and I'm too young to have courage." I disagree, because I will never forget that day when I walked into that room and saw the courage of a lion in the eyes of a 6-year-old girl. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was awesome. Our first place, Gerald R. Ford essay winner, receiving $2,000. Martha Veldkamp, Calvin Christian High School.
Uncommon Courage in Coopersville, Michigan. In August 2009, Paul Breen of Coopersville, Michigan, died at the age of 91. It was not until his funeral that my family found out how courageous Uncle Paul had been. His courage was based on his integrity and convictions. Courage is more than bravery, which is often an impulsive act. Courage is holding to a course of action based on one's moral convictions, even in the face of difficulty. Uncle Paul grew up on a farm outside of Coopersville, Michigan. His parents, especially his mother, were devout Christians. Every family member was required to memorize the 10 Commandments and apply them to their lives. As a young man, Uncle Paul left the farm for a well-paid job at General Motors plant in nearby Grand Rapids. Shortly after Uncle Paul started working there, the United States entered World War II. General Motors began retooling its plant to make parts for tanks. During World War II, patriotism was very strong. Newspapers and radio programs gave countless examples of heroic servicemen fighting for their country. Thousands of young men enlisted. Uncle Paul's older brother Grover was the first man to enlist at Wright Township Hall near the Breen farm. The Breen family was very proud of Grover's service to his country. Then Paul was drafted. Since the start of the war, Uncle Paul had been privately troubled with the thought that he might be called on to fight in a war and possibly have to kill fellow human beings. Not only had he been taught the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," but he had also been taught that man was made in the image of God. Uncle Paul thought that the United States was fighting a just war, but he also believed that he could not take the life of another person in good conscience. During World War II, conscientious objectors were rare. Nearly everyone believed that the United States was fighting a just war. Patriotism was especially great in the Coopersville area. Many of Uncle Paul's Dutch neighbors, relatives, and fellow church members had relatives in the Nazi-occupied Netherlands. In such an atmosphere, Uncle Paul must have found it very difficult to make his appeal to the draft board, which was composed of his neighbors and friends. He knew that if his appeal was successful, he would be highly criticized by everyone who knew him. He also knew that he would lose his good job at General Motors because conscientious objectors were not allowed to work with military equipment. He would be forever branded a coward. Despite these consequences, Paul Breen went to the draft board and told them that he could not serve in the military in good conscience. He made clear to them his love for the United States and its soldiers, who were risking their lives to preserve American freedom. He told them that he was willing to do almost anything, but he would not kill a fellow human being. The draft board must have sensed Uncle Paul's internal struggle. It released him from military duty and granted him conscientious objector status. The consequences of Uncle Paul's decision came quickly. He lost his job at General Motors and was assigned to work on a farm near Coopersville that supplied the war effort. He worked long hours for very low pay. One can only guess at the comments he endured from the families of military men, especially those whose sons had been injured or killed. Even his own family probably felt a sense of shame that their son and brother had seemingly shirked his duty to his country. Uncle Paul, however, worked hard and never complained. He supported the war effort in a way that did not compromise his convictions. After the war, people eventually forgot that Uncle Paul had been a conscientious objector, but Uncle Paul's conviction that all human life is precious to God never failed. He spent the rest of his life helping others in need. For many years, he volunteered at International Aid in Spring Lake, Michigan, collecting and sending supplies to foreign countries suffering from natural disasters. He also shared the produce from his large garden with local families in need. There was no veterans flag next to Uncle Paul's obituary in the paper. No Boy Scouts will put a flag on his grave next Memorial Day. Yet he was a courageous man. He held fast to his convictions, even when it was very unpopular to do so. Our family has no stories to tell of Uncle Paul's bravery in war, but the story of his personal conviction and courage is an important one that must be told.
Wow. Let's give all of them one more round of applause. At this time, Barbara McGregor will come back.
Thanks, Miranda. And thank you, students. You are all amazing. And I'm not just saying that. You really have to be proud of yourselves to make it to the top 18 from over 350 essays. Just a couple of closing remarks. We want to thank you all for coming. We have some refreshments for you out in the lobby. We hope you can stay and enjoy those and visit with our finalists. And if I could ask for second and third place to come up on the stage for just a minute as everyone else leaves, we've got some business to take care of. So congratulations again to all of you. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the reception and drive carefully on your way home tonight.